My name is 𝒂𝒊𝒅, and for 34 years, my family has labeled me the disappointment, the failure, the warning example. Tonight, I sit alone at a corner table during Governor Blackwell's annual gala, watching my golden child brother, Ryan, work the crowd. No one notices me in my simple black dress until the governor himself approaches, eyes widening with recognition. "Wait, you're Senator Ellis," he whispers. Across the room, my brother's face pales as years of family betrayal crumble in an instant. If you've ever been underestimated by those who should believe in you, stay with me. Let me know where you're watching from, hit subscribe, and discover how being underestimated became my greatest strength. Growing up as an Ellis meant something in Boston. Our family name was on buildings, in university halls, and featured in society pages, opening doors closed to most. The Ellis legacy was built on banking, business, and protecting appearances at all costs. My parents, Robert and Elizabeth Ellis, had clear expectations: excel academically, attend an Ivy League school, pursue a respected career in finance or law, marry well, and above all, avoid controversy. From my earliest memories, it was clear that my older brother Ryan embodied all they hoped for. He was handsome, athletic, and charismatic, with a charm that made him popular everywhere. Ryan followed the rules and seemed to instinctively understand the unwritten social codes of our privileged world. When Ryan brought home straight A's, my father beamed with pride. When he became captain of the lacrosse team, my mother threw an elaborate dinner party in celebration. I was different, not exactly rebellious, but curious in ways that made my parents uneasy. Where Ryan accepted our family's worldview without question, I asked why. While Ryan worked at country club events, I disappeared into books on history and government. My parents tolerated what they called my phase of intense intellectual curiosity, assuming I would eventually align with their expectations. The first real sign of trouble came in my sophomore year of high school. My English teacher assigned a project on a current political issue. While most students picked safe topics, I chose a controversial environmental policy that directly opposed the interests of several companies linked to my family's investments. My research was thorough, my analysis detailed, and my presentation earned the top grade in class. Instead of praise, my parents were horrified when another parent mentioned my project at a charity event. "Do you have any idea how this looks?" my father demanded that night, pacing our mahogany-paneled study. "The Harringtons were there. Morgan, their foundation, is considering a major partnership with us. And now they think we've raised some kind of radical environmentalist." My research was accurate, I argued. "The data shows these policies cause harm. Isn't the truth important?" My mother gave me that familiar, disappointed look. "Darling, there's the truth, and then there's what's appropriate. You need to learn the difference." That became the pattern. When I joined the debate team, it wasn't encouraged like my mother hoped. When I expressed interest in political science instead of business or law, it was seen as rebellious. Every choice I made that strayed from the Ellis blueprint felt like a personal attack on our family's legacy. By senior year, the contrast between Ryan and me was stark. He had already been accepted early decision to Harvard, following in our father's footsteps, moving through life with the ease of someone who never questioned their path. Meanwhile, I was drawn to social justice and political reform. I volunteered at a local campaign office, fascinated by the process of government and policy making. The campaign workers didn't care about my family name. They valued my ideas and work ethic. For the first time, I felt appreciated for who I was, not how well I fit expectations. When college application season came, I made a decision that changed my relationship with my parents forever. Despite having the grades and connections for an Ivy League acceptance, I chose to attend a respected state university with an excellent political science program. The night I told them, my father's face turned red. "You're throwing away opportunities people would kill for," he said, quietly but firmly. "This isn't just about you, it's about generations of Ellises before you who secured your future." "I'm not throwing anything away," I replied, keeping my voice steady. "I'm choosing a different path. A path to nowhere." My mother interrupted. "Political science. What does that even lead to?" "Government work. Campaigning for lost causes." What they didn't understand was that I had found something they never valued, a sense of purpose beyond wealth and social status. In their eyes, I had committed the ultimate sin. I had looked at the life they planned and decided it wasn't enough. As Ryan packed for Harvard that fall, relatives and family friends showered him with congratulations and advice. For me, there were tight smiles and questions that felt like accusations. "Are you sure about this, Morgan? Isn't transferring to a more suitable school still an option?" What no one knew was that beneath my calm exterior, I was nurturing political ambitions that would shock them all. I didn't just want to study politics, I wanted to change the system from within. But I kept these dreams to myself, knowing they would only give my family more reasons to criticize me. On the day I left for college, my grandmother Grace slipped a note into my hand. "Be brave enough to be different. Someone has to be." It was the only encouragement I received from my family, and I held on to it like a talisman through the challenges ahead. The University of Massachusetts campus was nothing like Harvard's ivy-covered walls and exclusive clubs. Here, merit mattered more than family ties, and diversity of thought was not just accepted but encouraged. For the first time, I felt free to explore ideas without the weight of family judgment. In my first semester, I took a political theory course taught by Professor Diana Mitchell, a former legislative director who left Washington to mentor future political leaders. From the moment she called on me in class to challenge my analysis of a Supreme Court decision, I knew I had found a mentor who would push me to think deeper than ever before. "You have a natural talent for policy analysis," Professor Mitchell told me after class, "but you need to trust your voice. Your ideas matter." Ms. 𝒂𝒐𝒕𝒉𝒆𝒓 simple words were like water in a desert. No one in my family had ever told me my ideas mattered. They only cared about how my ideas reflected on them. While I immersed myself in political theory and constitutional law was Ryan's domain at Harvard, my parents' social media was filled with photos of Ryan attending business school events, networking through family ties, and interning at prestigious financial firms. Our lives couldn't have been more different. During my sophomore year, I joined a campus group advocating for educational equity. We organized peaceful campaigns, conducted thorough research, and presented data-driven proposals to the university administration. When our efforts led to expanded scholarships for low-income students, I felt a fulfillment I had never experienced before. This was no abstract theory. It was real change improving people's lives. My growing passion for advocacy made family holidays more tense. What had once been subtle disapproval turned into outright dismissal of my interests and accomplishments. At Thanksgiving during my junior year, Ryan entertained the table with stories from his summer internship at a top investment bank. My father listened proudly, asking about Ryan's contacts and mentors. Then, during a quiet moment, my Aunt Margaret asked, "And what about you, Morgan, still doing that political thing?" Before I could answer, my father interrupted dismissively. "Morgan is still finding herself. Hopefully, she'll get serious before graduation." I stared at my plate, swallowing my response, and hurt. Quietly, I said, "Actually, I've been offered a campaign job for Senator Warner this summer." The table fell silent until my mother forced a tight smile and asked, "How interesting. Will it pay well?" "It's about experience, not money," I replied. My father scoffed. "Experience doesn't pay student loans. My scholarships cover most of my tuition." I reminded him scholarships that could have gone to someone who truly needed them. "If you had just accepted Harvard's legacy admission," my mother added, clearly recycling an old argument. Ryan tried to change the subject, but the damage was done. Once again, I was the family disappointment, chasing that political thing instead of a proper career. During these years, Professor Mitchell became my refuge. She saw my interest in progressive politics and connected me with opportunities to learn firsthand about campaign organizing. Under her guidance, I volunteered for local candidates, learning the often unglamorous but vital parts of political work: phone banking, data analysis, voter outreach. "Politics isn't just about big ideas," she told me. "It's about showing up, doing the hard work, and building relationships with the people you want to serve." By senior year, I had built a strong political resume, culminating in managing a successful city council campaign for a first-time candidate. When I was offered a full-time position at a nonprofit focused on voter education after graduation, I felt my unconventional path was finally paying off. My family disagreed. When I announced my plans over Christmas break, my father's response was immediate and harsh. "That's enough," he said, setting down his whiskey sharply. "We've indulged this hobby of yours for 4 years. Morgan, it's time to grow up and get a real job." "This is a real job," I insisted. "Important work that makes a difference." "A difference to whom?" my mother asked. "Certainly not to your future or this family's reputation." "We've been patient," my father continued. "We allowed you to attend that school and follow this interest, but our patience and support have limits." The meaning was clear the next morning, when he told me they would no longer provide financial support after graduation. No help with rent, no health insurance coverage. "You chose this path," he said coldly. "Deal with the consequences." Ryan watched from the doorway, his face caught between sympathy and relief that he wasn't the target of their disappointment. In that moment I realized my brother was as trapped by family expectations as I was. He just fit their mold perfectly. I left Boston the day after Christmas and returned to campus. Alone in my dorm room that night, I promised myself I would forge my own way with or without my family's approval. I would prove that success is measured by impact, not income. Someday, they would have to admit I was right to follow my conscience. I had no idea then just how dramatic that proof would be. My first apartment after college was far from the Ellis family estate, a fifth-floor walk-up with unreliable heat and a shared bathroom. It was all I could afford on my nonprofit salary. Each month was a financial balancing act: student loans, rent, groceries, and a professional wardrobe for political work. Meanwhile, Ryan graduated with honors and quickly stepped into a 6-figure job at a top consulting firm. His Instagram showed business-class flights, luxury apartments, and events with Boston's elite. My parents made sure everyone knew about Ryan's rapid rise. The voter education nonprofit where I worked was underfunded but essential. We created materials explaining the electoral process, held registration drives in underserved communities, and worked to boost civic participation among young voters. The hours were long, the pay low, but the work was deeply meaningful in a way I couldn't fully explain to anyone who hadn't lived it. Family gatherings became tests of endurance. At my cousin's wedding, I overheard my mother telling a family friend, "Morgan is still in her idealistic phase, working for some voter thing. We're hoping she'll come to her senses soon." Thanksgiving that year pushed things to a breaking point. Ryan arrived with news of a promotion and bonus, and my parents celebrated with champagne. When the conversation turned to me, I shared that our voter education efforts had increased youth turnout by 12% in recent local elections. My father swirled his champagne, unimpressed. "And how exactly does that lead to a career, Morgan?" "It already is my career," I replied. "We're making democracy more accessible." He sighed, setting down his glass. "Let me be direct. You're 30 years old, living in what I can only imagine is a substandard apartment, making about $40,000 a year with your education and connections. This is frankly a waste." The room fell silent. Even Ryan looked uneasy. "Robert," my mother murmured, though it was unclear whether she was urging him to continue or to stop. "No, Elizabeth. This needs to be said. We've tolerated this experiment for years. Morgan, you had every advantage, every opportunity, and you've wasted them all on this hobby. Your brother is buying his first property while you struggle to pay rent. This isn't success by any standard." I stood, hands trembling. "Success isn't just about money, Dad. In the real world, it absolutely is," he replied dismissively. I gathered my coat and headed for the door. I heard my mother call after me, but I couldn't bear another moment of their judgment. In my car, I finally allowed myself to cry, not only for their harsh words, but for the painful truth that my family might never value the path I had chosen. Alone that night in my apartment, doubts crept in. Was I fooling myself? Was my work truly making a difference? Would I always struggle financially while my peers advanced in conventional careers? For the first time, I seriously considered giving up my political dreams and pursuing a more lucrative, family-approved profession. The turning point came 2 weeks later at a community forum our organization had arranged. After the event, a young single mother approached me, her eyes shining with hope. "Before your program, I never voted," she said. "I didn't think it mattered for people like me. Now my daughter sees me researching candidates, filling out my ballot. She knows her voice will matter too someday. That's because of you." Her words restored my fading faith. This was why I'd chosen this path, not for wealth or status, but to help people realize their power in our democracy. Around this time, I met Logan Mitchell at a political fundraiser, the son of my former professor. Logan was the communications director for a progressive state representative. Tall, with thoughtful green eyes and a quick mind, he was the first person who seemed to truly understand my passion for politics without doubting it. "So, you're the famous Morgan Ellis," he said when Professor Mitchell introduced us. "My mother says you're going to be governor someday." I laughed off the compliment. But Logan's genuine interest made me feel seen in a way I rarely had. Our first date turned into a 5-hour conversation about electoral reform, community organizing, and our shared vision for a more inclusive democracy. With Logan's encouragement and my growing political network, I made a decision that shocked everyone who knew me. I would run for city council. At 31, with no family support and limited finances, it seemed impossible. But I had built strong community relationships through my nonprofit work and understood the everyday issues many politicians overlooked. When I told my family, their reactions were predictably dismissive. "City council?" my mother repeated, as if I'd announced plans to join the circus. "Morgan, be serious." "I am serious," I said firmly. "I've already filed the paperwork." "This is embarrassing," my father said flatly. "You'll lose waste what little money you have, and then what? Have you thought this through at all?" "I have," I said. "I have a campaign manager, a treasurer, and a growing team of volunteers. We have a solid strategy focused on community engagement." Ryan, who had recently started working for rising political star James Blackwell, looked uncomfortable. "Politics is more complicated than you think, Morgan. It's not just about good intentions." "I'm well aware," I replied, biting back a sharper response. It was typical of my family to assume I was naive, rather than consider I might be qualified. My grassroots campaign was nothing like the big budget operations I'd later face. We worked out of a borrowed office, relied heavily on volunteers, and focused on direct voter contact. I knocked on thousands of doors, listening to residents' concerns and sharing my vision for a more responsive local government. On election night, Logan and I gathered with our small team at a neighborhood restaurant. When the results showed I had won by a narrow margin, the room erupted in cheers. It was a small victory in the wider political world, but to me, it felt monumental. My phone stayed silent that night, no congratulations from my family. Despite the local paper covering my win, when Ryan finally texted the next day, it was characteristically backhanded. "Congrats on the council seat. Small pond, but I guess it's a start." My mother's eventual response was just as lukewarm. We're surprised by your win. The district must have had a very low bar for candidates. Their refusal to recognize my genuine achievement only strengthened my resolve. I would prove my value not by their standards, but through effective public service that made a difference in people's lives. And I would do it without the Ellis name opening doors for me. My first term on the city council was a crash course in practical governance. I quickly learned that good intentions alone weren't enough. Effective public service required strategic thinking, coalition building, and a thick skin. I focused on initiatives to increase affordable housing, improve public transportation, and create a more transparent city government. To my surprise, I found I had a knack for the detailed policy work many elected officials avoided. I could analyze complex reports, identify practical solutions, and build consensus among diverse groups. My community organizing background proved invaluable, helping me connect policy decisions to their real-world effects on constituents. 6 months into my term, a local reporter wrote a profile highlighting my effectiveness despite my youth and lack of traditional political connections. The article mentioned my family only briefly, noting I had forged my own path independent of the prominent Boston Ellis name. The profile caught the attention of several state-level political operatives who began to see me as a rising talent. Meanwhile, Ryan had solidified his role as chief of staff to Governor James Blackwell, appearing frequently in state political coverage, always polished, always by the governor's side. Our parents never missed a chance to brag about Ryan's proximity to power at family events. Conversations invariably turned to Ryan's insider stories about the governor's mansion or policy initiatives he was helping lead. Meanwhile, my city council work was treated as a curious hobby in comparison. Ryan was just telling the governor about this yesterday, my mother would say at dinner parties, while I quietly picked up my food. Despite their ongoing dismissal, my reputation as an effective public servant continued to grow. By the end of my first term, I had successfully championed several key policies that improved daily life for my constituents. Local media began to speculate about my future political prospects, suggesting I was well positioned for higher office. When a state senate seat in my district unexpectedly opened due to the incumbent's health issues, a coalition of community leaders and progressive organizations approached me about running. The opportunity was both thrilling and daunting. A state senate race would demand far more resources and attract much greater scrutiny than my city council campaign. After many long conversations with Logan, who had become not just my partner in life, but my most trusted political advisor, I decided to enter the race. The night before my public announcement, I called my parents, hoping my growing record of public service might soften their opposition. My mother answered, her voice immediately cooling when she recognized me. When I shared my plans to run for state senate, the line fell silent for several seconds. "Morgan," she finally said, voice tight with restraint, "don't you think this has gone far enough? This political adventure of yours?" "Mom, this isn't an adventure. This is my career, my calling. I'm good at this work, and it matters." "What matters?" she replied. "Is that you're continuing to alienate yourself from this family? Do you have any idea how difficult it is for us to explain your choices to our friends? To have one child working respectfully with the governor while the other insists on this public crusading. I'm not asking for your approval anymore," I said quietly. "I'm 33 years old. I'm just letting you know out of courtesy. If you announce this campaign," she said, her voice hardening, "do not expect any support from us, financial or otherwise. You will be completely on your own." "I've been on my own for years, Mom. Nothing new there." The line went silent again before she spoke with finality. "I really thought you would outgrow this phase, Morgan. Your father and I can't keep watching you throw your life away on these political fantasies. When you're ready to make sensible choices, we'll be here. Until then, perhaps it's best if we have some distance." The call ended unresolved, leaving me with the grim realization that pursuing my political ambitions might mean permanently sacrificing my relationship with my family. It was a steep price, but I had come too far to turn back now. The state senate campaign was grueling. My opponents used my family's lack of support against me, suggesting even those closest to me didn't trust my judgment. Anonymous quotes appeared in political coverage. The Ellis family has a long tradition of public service through business and philanthropy. Morgan's approach is considered unconventional within the family. Through it all, Logan remained my rock. After a particularly difficult campaign day, he surprised me by proposing in the quiet of our apartment no grand gestures, just sincere words and a simple ring that symbolized our partnership of equals. "Whatever happens with this election," he said, "I want you to know someone believes in you completely." Despite being outspent and facing established political opponents, my grassroots campaign resonated with voters tired of business-as-usual politics. On election night, when the results confirmed my victory, I allowed myself a moment of pure vindication. I had achieved this without family connections, without family money, without family support. At my swearing-in ceremony, I scanned the audience, knowing I wouldn't see my parents or Ryan, but hoping, against hope, that something might have changed. The only familiar family face was my grandmother Grace. Now using a walker but beaming with unmistakable pride, "I always knew you were meant for something extraordinary," she whispered when I embraced her after the ceremony. "Not in spite of your differences from the family, but because of them." Her presence was a bum, but the absence of my parents and brother left a hollow space that even electoral victory couldn't fill. As I took my seat in the state Senate chambers for the first time, I wondered if any achievement would ever be enough to bridge the divide between the life my family had planned for me and the one I had chosen for myself. My first term in the Senate was transformative. Rather than grandstanding or chasing headlines, I focused on the unglamorous but vital work of crafting sound legislation. I developed a reputation as someone who did her homework, asked insightful questions, and could work across partisan lines to get practical results. The local press dubbed me the policy wonk with a purpose. Not the flashiest political brand, but one that earned respect from colleagues and constituents alike. I specialized in education policy, healthcare access, and government transparency areas where my detailed approach could make tangible differences in people's lives. By my third year, I had successfully sponsored 17 bills signed into law, rare feat for a first-term senator from the minority party. My effectiveness caught the eye of national party leaders scouting talent for higher office. Meanwhile, Ryan Starr continued to rise alongside Governor Blackwell. He had fully embraced his role as the governor's right hand, appearing frequently in state media as the administration's spokesperson. Our parents' social media accounts regularly featured photos of Ryan with the governor at official functions there. Pride unmistakable. The divide between us calcified into complete estrangement. I heard about family events only through occasional updates from Grandma Grace, who maintained contact despite my parents' disapproval. According to her, my parents developed a standard line for social occasions. "Morgan is pursuing her own path," a phrase crafted to sound supportive while saying nothing at all. Logan and I settled into a fulfilling life together. We married in a small ceremony attended by close friends and political allies, with Grandma Grace as the only family member present. When my parents declined the invitation, citing prior commitments with a terse note, I felt the final door close on any hope of reconciliation. Then, during my fourth year in the Senate, an unexpected opportunity arose. A U.S. Senate seat was opening in a special election after a senior senator retired due to health concerns. The compressed timeline meant a fast-paced, high-stakes campaign with national implications. When party leadership approached me about running, my first reaction was hesitation. A U.S. Senate campaign would bring intense scrutiny not just of my political record, but of my personal life, including the family estrangement I'd largely kept private. "They'll use your family against you," Logan warned during one late-night discussion. "They'll find ways to suggest that if your own family doesn't support you, voters shouldn't either." "I know," I sighed, staring at the ceiling of our bedroom. "But is that reason enough to step aside? To let someone else take this opportunity?" What complicated matters further were the specific circumstances of the political moments. Several critical pieces of the night of the gala arrived with a swirl of anticipation and quiet resolve. Logan and I dressed carefully, no flashy designer gowns, just elegant but understated attire that said I belonged here on my own terms. As we arrived at the grand ballroom, the glittering chandeliers and well-dressed crowd were a stark contrast to the grassroots meetings, where my political journey had truly begun. From the moment we entered, I scanned the room for any sign of my family. My parents were not immediately visible, but I knew Ryan was likely somewhere nearby, orchestrating the event behind the scenes. The evening unfolded in a blur of polite conversation, speeches, and networking. When my name was announced during a brief segment honoring public servants, I felt a flicker of pride but also the familiar pang of absence where family support should have been. As the crowd mingled, I caught glimpses of familiar faces, allies, community leaders, and some local media. Logan stayed close, offering steady support. I answered questions about my priorities and recent legislation, careful to maintain the poise and professionalism that had defined my career. Then, near the end of the evening, a quiet moment arrived. Ryan approached, flanked by a few colleagues. Our eyes met briefly, a flicker of something unspoken passed between us. He nodded curtly, a guarded acknowledgement, then turned away before I could gather the courage to speak. My parents were nowhere to be seen, their absence a stark reminder of the chasm that remained. Later, as we left the gala, Logan slipped his hand into mine. "You were remarkable tonight," he said softly. "You didn't need them there to prove who you are." I squeezed his hand, feeling a surge of gratitude. For all the challenges, the rejection, and the loneliness, I had carved out my own place, a position earned through dedication, resilience, and the courage to be different. That night, I understood more clearly than ever that family might not define success for me. Instead, it was the lives I could impact, the policies I could shape, and the community I could serve that truly mattered. And with that conviction, I was ready for whatever lay ahead. I selected a simple yet elegant black dress, understated but suitable for the formal event. Logan, looking sharp in his tuxedo, squeezed my hand as our car neared the venue. a historic downtown hotel renowned for hosting the state's most prestigious gatherings. "Remember who you are now," he whispered. "Senator Kennedy Reynolds. You've earned your place here." The grand ballroom had been beautifully transformed for the evening, with crystal chandeliers casting a warm glow over the meticulously arranged tables. A string quartet played softly as the state's political and business leaders mingled, cocktails in hand. From the entrance, I immediately noticed Ryan across the room, confidently working the crowd in a perfectly tailored tuxedo, every bit the political operator he had become. As Logan and I entered, I felt a mix of relief and disappointment that my parents were absent. Perhaps they had heard of my attendance and chose to avoid any potential discomfort. We were guided to a table near the back, far from the governor's table, where Ryan would likely be seated. The strategic seating was clear, enough to acknowledge my office, but distant enough to prevent family drama. Throughout the dinner, I stayed composed, engaging politely with the other guests at our table: a university president, a hospital administrator, and his wife, and a judge I knew from my state senate days. None mentioned my brother or questioned our separate seating, though I caught occasional curious looks between them. Across the room, I watched Ryan in his element, leaning in to whisper to Governor Blackwell and laughing at the right moments. The perfect political lieutenant. He never once glanced my way, though he must have known I was there. Between the main course and dessert, I excused myself to visit the restroom. Walking through the ballroom, I overheard snippets of conversation that made my stomach tighten. "That's the Reynolds girl, isn't it? And I heard she's never quite found her place. Such a shame given their family ties." Others said, "Ryan is the successful one, expected to run for office soon." Returning to the table, my confidence wavered. Despite my achievements, in this state and these circles, I was still defined by the family narrative, the failed Reynolds, the disappointment, the cautionary tale. After dessert, Governor Blackwell took the podium to speak about education and the foundation's work. My mind remained tangled in overheard remarks, and I barely noticed when he announced he'd be thanking key supporters personally. Lost in thought, I was caught off guard when the room quieted near our table. Looking up, I saw Governor Blackwell approaching, flanked by aides and security. Ryan followed behind, focused on a notepad rather than the room. The governor stopped at our table, raising his eyebrows as he focused on me. Confusion crossed his face before recognition dawned. "Wait, you're Senator Reynolds?" he asked quietly, surprised. The table fell silent. Behind him, Ryan's head snapped up, his face draining of color. I extended my hand professionally. "Yes, Governor. It's a pleasure to meet you in person. Thank you for having me this evening." Governor Blackwell shook my hand warmly, his surprise turning into genuine interest. "The education bill you authored and your work on the Federal Education Committee have been impressive. I didn't expect you here tonight." From the corner of my eye, I saw Ryan frozen, his composed mask slipping to reveal shock. Around us, conversations hushed as people watched. "I've been wanting to discuss your healthcare access proposal," the governor continued, unaware of the tension. "It aligns with initiatives we're considering. Perhaps we could meet. While you're in the state, I would welcome that." "Governor," I replied, maintaining composure despite the growing whispers. The governor glanced at Ryan, who had finally approached, his face pale but composed. "Ryan, why didn't you mention Senator Reynolds would be attending? We could have arranged a proper welcome." A flash of panic and embarrassment crossed my brother's face before he recovered. "An oversight, Governor. My apologies." The governor turned back to me, frowning slightly. "Reynolds is there, a relation. The name is in common." Before I could answer, Ryan stepped forward. "Senator Reynolds is my sister, Governor." The surprise on Governor Blackwell's face was clear. "Your sister? I had no idea you had a sister in the Senate." He looked between us, reassessing. "Why haven't you mentioned this before?" The moment stretched as nearby tables openly watched. Ryan's career, partly built on our family's reputation, faced a complex public revelation. "Family and politics can be complicated," Ryan offered cautiously. "Indeed they can," I interjected smoothly, saving him from further explanation. "But ultimately, we all serve the public in our own ways." Governor Blackwell, a skilled politician himself, quickly moved the conversation on. "Well, this is a delightful discovery. We must have you both at the mansion soon, a family of public servants." Quite remarkable. As the governor moved on, Ryan and I remained in an awkward silence. Years of history condensed into one public moment. "Kennedy," he said quietly, "I didn't know you'd be here." "Clearly," I replied evenly. "As a U.S. senator from this state, it would be unusual not to be invited." "That's not what I meant," he said, discomfort showing. "We should talk not here, but soon should we?" I met his gaze directly. After years of silence and parents who misrepresented my career to their circles, what exactly was there to discuss? Around us, the room's normal buzz returned, though I noticed several people watching our exchange with interest. Ryan glanced around, aware of the attention. "This isn't the place. But yes, we should talk. Things are complicated. They always have been." "I agree," I said. "But they're also simple. I chose a different path from the one laid out for me. That shouldn't make me a family outcast." Before he could respond, the moment ended. Logan gently touched my arm and said, "The governor's wife is trying to get your attention, Kennedy." Indeed, across the room the First Lady was signaling for me to join her group. The revelation of my identity had clearly changed my standing. At the event, "We'll continue this another time," I told Ryan, straightening my shoulders. "I have people to meet." As I moved away, head held high, I felt a weight lifting the burden of hiding, of feeling diminished, of accepting my family's narrative about me. In this room, where I had arrived as the disappointing Reynolds, I was now recognized as Senator Reynolds, respected for my own achievements rather than judged by family expectations. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of introductions and conversations. Political leaders who barely acknowledged me earlier now sought me out, and business executives showed interest in my committee work. Throughout, I maintained a professional demeanor, neither boasting about the revelation nor letting the years of family rejection show. As Logan and I prepared to leave, Governor Blackwell approached again, this time without Ryan. "Senator Reynolds," he said quietly, "please forgive my ignorance earlier. Had I known you were related to my chief of staff, I would have ensured a more fitting welcome." "No apology needed, Governor," I replied. "Family matters can be complicated." He nodded thoughtfully. "Indeed, but I must say, having followed your work in the Senate, especially on education reform, I find myself questioning the stories I've heard through certain channels. You are clearly an exceptional public servant." "Thank you, Governor. That means a great deal." As our car pulled away, Logan took my hand. "You handled that with remarkable grace." "I've had years of practice," I said, glancing back at the glowing hotel. "But something feels different now, like the truth has finally broken through." "The truth was always there," Logan said gently, "but now others can see it too." In that moment, I realized that while reconciliation with my family remained uncertain, I had achieved something perhaps more valuably, had reclaimed my own story. No longer defined by what the Reynolds family said about me, I had written my own narrative, and it stood on its own merits for all to see. The revelation at the governor's gala sparked ripples far beyond that evening. By morning, several state political blogs had shared the story of the Reynolds siblings' reunion, complete with speculation about our family dynamics. The public narrative quickly shifted from questions about my exclusion to wonder at how my achievements had been consistently overlooked. 3 days after the gala, my office phone rang from a number I instantly recognized but hadn't seen in years, my father's private line. "Kennedy," he began without preamble, "I understand you attended the governor's gala." "I did," I replied, keeping my tone neutral, as expected from a state senator. There was a pause, heavy with unspoken history. "Your mother and I have been discussing recent developments. We think it might be appropriate to have dinner while you're in the state to clear the air." The careful wording was telling, not an apology, nor admission of fault, merely an acknowledgement that circumstances had changed. My new position made me someone they could no longer dismiss. "I appreciate the invitation," I said cautiously, "but before any family dinner, we need an honest conversation about the past several years." "The past is the past, Kennedy," my father replied, irritation clear in his voice. "Looking back serves no purpose." "I disagree," I said firmly. "You and Mom have actively misrepresented my career and choices to your social circle for years. You painted me as a failure when I was succeeding on my own terms. That needs to be addressed before we can move forward." Another long silence followed. "Perhaps we had different perspectives on your decisions," he finally offered. "It's not about perspectives, Dad. It's about respect. You couldn't respect that I chose a different path. Instead of supporting me, you punished me. That hurt." The vulnerability in my words hung between Israeli had I allowed myself to express the personal pain their rejection caused. "Kennedy," my father said softly, "family is complicated. Maybe we can start fresh. Your Senate position is impressive. We can build from there." His qualified response was typically unable to simply say he was proud or admit he was wrong, offering only conditional approval now that my success was undeniable. "I need time to think about this," I told him. "And if we meet, I want Logan there. He's my family now, the one who supported me when you and Mom wouldn't." "As you wish," my father said stiffly. "Let us know your decision." After hanging up, I sat in my office, emotions swirling. Part of me wanted to reject the offer outright, telling my parents they'd lost the right to be in my life. Another part, the little girl who had always longed for their approval, wanted to embrace any chance for reconciliation. Logan helped me find balance. "You don't have to decide everything at once," he advised. "You can set boundaries, while keeping the door open." 2 weeks later, I met my parents in a private dining room at a discreet restaurant. Logan sat beside me, his quiet support strengthening my resolve. The conversation was strange but civil, focusing mostly on surface topics. My committee work, Logan's career, renovations to our DC apartment. When my mother finally addressed our estrangement, her approach was typically indirect. "We may not have always understood your choices, Kennedy, but we never stopped caring." "Caring isn't the same as respecting," I replied evenly. "You didn't just misunderstand my choices, you actively disparaged them. You told people I had failed when I was succeeding. That goes beyond misunderstanding." My father shifted uneasily. Perhaps we were hasty in our judgments. It was the closest thing to an apology I was likely to receive, not admitting fault, but admitting poor timing, maintaining plausible deniability while offering minimal concession. Moving forward, I said carefully, I need honesty. If you want to be part of my life, you need to respect the life I've built to my career, my marriage, my choices. I won't accept less. The dinner ended with tentative plans for future contact but no real resolution. As we left, my mother gave me a stiff embrace and whispered, "We are proud of you, Kennedy." In our own way, those qualified words summed up our relationship perfectly. Acknowledgement wrapped in conditions, acceptance with limits. By their worldview, Ryan proved to be more complex. A week after the gala, he asked for a private meeting at a coffee shop near my district office. When I arrived, he looked different than at the governor's event, less polished, more human, with dark circles under his eyes that suggested sleepless nights. "I owe you an apology," he said after we settled with our coffees, "not just for the gala, but for years of complicity." His directness caught me off guard. "Complicity in the family narrative about you," he clarified. "I knew it wasn't accurate. I knew you were succeeding in making a real difference, but I never corrected them. I never stood up for you. Why didn't you?" I asked the question that had haunted me for years, finally spoken aloud. Ryan stared into his coffee. "It was easier not to. As long as you were the disappointment, I didn't have to question my own choices. I could be the success story without examining whether I was truly happy with the path I'd taken." "And are you happy?" I pressed. His hesitation said everything. "I'm successful by their measure," he admitted. "But watching you forge your own path, standing by your principles even when it cost you family support, it's made me question things." Our conversation didn't immediately heal years of distance, but it opened a door. Unlike our parents, Ryan seemed genuinely interested in rebuilding a relationship based on honesty rather than appearances. Over the following months, we exchanged occasional texts and calls, slowly reconnecting outside of our parents' influence. The most unexpected reconciliation came from my grandmother, Grace. After the gala revelation, she reached out with a surprising confession. She had been following my career closely all along, saving news articles about my legislative work and even watching committee hearings online. "I always believed in you," she told me during a quiet lunch at her assisted living facility, "but I was a coward. I should have defended you more openly to your parents. You were the only one who showed any support at all." I reminded her gently that meant everything to me. Grace took my hand, her paper-thin skin cool against mine. "I want you to know something. Your grandfather, my husband, was like you. He questioned everything, wanted to make a difference rather than just accumulate wealth. Your father rejected that side of himself to please his own father. When he saw it in you, so strong and undeniable, I think it frightened him. It reminded him of the path he didn't take." This revelation shed new light on my family dynamics. Perhaps my father's rejection wasn't just about my choices, but what they reflected back about his own life. As my first Senate term progressed, I channeled these personal insights into my work. I became a leading voice for bills supporting family mental health resources and programs to help first-generation college students navigate systems their families couldn't guide them through. My experience of forging a path without family backing gave me a unique perspective on the challenges faced by those without built-in advantages. Logan and I began serious talks about starting a family of our own. The prospect of parenthood brought inevitable questions about what kind of family culture we wanted to create. "I know exactly what I don't want," I told Logan one evening as we discussed possibilities. "I never want our child to feel that our love depends on following a prescribed path. We'll make mistakes," Logan reminded me. "All parents do, but ours will be different from those your parents made." Our journey toward building our own family coincided with a gradual, cautious reconnection with my parents. Holiday gatherings were still somewhat strained, but showed genuine effort from all sides. My mother made a point of asking about my legislative priorities. My father, awkward in his way, occasionally forwarded articles about my work, with brief notes of approval. On my 40th birthday, my parents hosted a small dinner at their home, the first invitation I'd received in over a decade. As we gathered in the formal dining room where I'd endured so many painful family moments, my father surprised everyone by raising his glass in a toast. His voice was rough with emotion, rare for him. "To Kennedy," he said, "who had the courage to define success on her own terms. You've made a difference in ways we never imagined." It wasn't a full acknowledgement of past mistakes, but it was a sincere appreciation of my journey, something I hadn't expected in years. I accepted it for what it was, an imperfect olive branch from an imperfect family, looking around the table at my parents trying, in their limited way, to bridge the gap between us. At Ryan, with his newfound willingness to question the family story. At Logan, who showed me what unconditional support truly means. I realized that relationships exist on a spectrum of health and dysfunction. Perfect reconciliation might never come, but perhaps something genuine could grow in the middle ground. The deepest lesson of my journey wasn't about politics or family, but authenticity. By refusing to conform to others' definitions of success and worth, I discovered my own. The path was harder and lonelier at times, but ultimately led to a life aligned with my values, not anyone else's expectations. Looking back, I see that being underestimated was actually my greatest strength. It forced me to trust my own judgment, build resilience, and find value in myself rather than others' approval. These qualities served me well not just in politics, but in the more fundamental challenge of living authentically. I often wonder if you have been underestimated or dismissed by those whose approval you sought. How did it shape you? Did it break you or build you up? Sometimes our greatest strengths grow from our deepest wounds. If we are brave enough to forge our own path through the pain, thank you for staying with me through this story. If it resonated with you, please consider subscribing and sharing with others who might need to hear that being underestimated can become their superpower too. Let me know in the comments about your own experiences with family expectations. Sometimes, sharing our stories is the first step toward healing.